Hey guys, today we're going to talk a little bit about the first four books of the Odyssey, traditionally attributed to Homer. Uh, this and the Iliad are the two main epics that we have remaining from the Greeks. They were used to teach young Greek men morality and what it means to be a warrior, things such as that. In the time. And it's interesting to note that when the books were redacted, when they were first written down, that the tales would seem quite old to the people who were reading them. 400 years perhaps even removed. The Greeks, when these tales were first began to be told, when they were set, was a time of when Greece was greatly prosperous. But then there was a great period of the Dark Ages, the Greek Dark Ages, where this culture, this Mycenaean culture, was wiped out. But these tales, even though the Greeks lost their written language, were preserved through oral poetry, bards reciting these tales at feasts and things such as that. And so that's one reason why you see, as you read the tale, some of these repeated phrases, even repeated speeches over and over again. It's a mnemonic device to help the bards remember these great tales of the past. The Iliad is the companion piece to the Odyssey. It was set before the Odyssey during the Trojan War, though not during the portion of the Trojan War that most of us think about when the Greeks sacked the city of Troy with the Trojan horse and all of that. The Iliad set before all of that, in the middle of the war. And we see the rage of Achilles and his fight with the great Trojan hero Hector. The story talks about what it means to be a great warrior, Achilles struggles with his own mortality, things such as that. What does it mean to be honorable in the time of war? Whereas this piece is focusing more on home. It's surprising to know most people think of the Odyssey, they think of Odysseus' travels. Of course, that's about half of the book, but it's not the whole story. The other half of the book is when Odysseus is actually on Ithaca. So this tale is more of a morality tale. It's separated from war. It begins, the first four books that we read focused on Telemachus. Odysseus is mentioned, but we don't actually see him appear on scene until later. Whenever you read any text, usually the introduction and the conclusion are two of the most important portions of that text. And I call your attention to the introduction of the Odyssey on page 178. The poet addresses the muse, his muse, who in this case is mnemosyne, or memory. Remember, we talked about how important it is for poets to remember these tales. And mnemosyne is the mother of the muses. It's important to note that the poet invokes the most important muse, which is memory itself, of the cunning heroes. So Odysseus is a cunning hero. This is one of the main reasons why he's valued, is for his cunning. In the same way that Jacob's cunning was valued, argued in the Hebrews, by the Hebrews, Odysseus' cunning is valued here by Athena and by the Greeks. He is a wanderer. blown off course time and time again. We learn of all the cities he saw, the mines he grasped, the suffering he felt deep in his heart as he struggled to survive and bring his men home, but could not save them. So these are many of the themes and events that we'll see in the story. We'll see all the strange places that he visited, which would have been strange, but somewhat known by the Greeks at the time. And part of the story is to teach people how they should act among strangers, and which strangers were civilized and friendly, and how to notice when they were not friendly and hospitable. The story also speaks of the suffering of those who wander. It seems to be a warning against traveling too far from home, because what might happen? What might happen to your family? What might happen to your house? What might happen to your person and your friends if you leave home? And mostly for Odysseus, it seems to say that a lot of bad things happen. Though in the end, of course, he's rewarded and everything's fine. Yes. And the preamble also brings our attention to how his men die. They defied Hyperion, the sun god, and he snuffed out their day of return. Largely, the sufferings that we occur are due to gods, according to the Greeks, whether we have pleased the gods or not. So it's good to try to remain on the God's good side, though it's really hard for you to know whether you're going to do something bad or good ultimately. So, in the first 4 books, we learn of Telemachus, who is Odysseus' son, and we learn of Odysseus' family struggles since the man has been gone for 20 years. Suitors have come to their house, and they are trying to take over the house. They're stealing food and all of these things. They're being very inhospitable guests. They're running the house into the ground. And they're mocking Telemachus, and they even plan to murder him. So these men are meant to be portrayed as the exact opposite of how you should conduct yourself in another man's household. At the beginning of book 1, we see a scene with the gods. Athena brings to everybody's mind that Odysseus is still suffering, and we need to get him on home now, because I think he has served his time, is what Athena says. Couched in this conversation is a mirroring tale to Odysseus' struggles. We see the story of Agamemnon, who was also wandering, and his son Orestes. Agamemnon returns from his travels and is murdered by his wife, who has made a cuckold of him with Aegisthus. Those two murder Agamemnon, and Aegisthus rules the land for 7 years until Agamemnon's son Orestes comes and avenges him. And each of these characters in this tale, which is couched within this larger narrative, show a mirroring representation of Odysseus' family. So Agamemnon versus Odysseus. Agamemnon suffers an awful fate, whereas Odysseus, we see, will triumph ultimately. Why is that? Because we see 2 different types of women. The type of women who lacks fidelity, the type of woman who lacks fidelity in Clytemnestra, versus the woman who remains true for 20 years in Penelope. We see Aegisthus versus Antinous, one of the main suitors, and just the suitors in general. Those two mirror each other. and Orestes and Telemachus. Both of these men are praised for their ability to avenge their fathers. And after that, Athena again says, "Yo, Daddy, come on, let's go get Odysseus. He's over here on Calypso's island. We need to. He is, he's a good man. He didn't deserve death. So what's he's suffering? Let's bring him home." And we learn of why Odysseus is still suffering, because he killed Polyphemus, the son of Poseidon, and Poseidon's raging at him. We'll see that story told in further detail later. And so Athena, after she's been granted the permission of Zeus, she goes to Ithaca and stirs up Telemachus, Odysseus' son. She says that Hermes needs to go and get Odysseus and tell Calypso to release Odysseus, whereas I will go and stir up his son. And why does she do that? It's a question. I mean, why does Telemachus matter? Telemachus' narrative is a coming-of-age story. It shows to the young Greek man what it means to be a good man. How does one become a man worthy of being a head of a household? How does he win fame and a name for himself? And Telemachus is going to do that. You see on line 180, Athena's reasoning. She says, I'm going to send him off to these far-off places, Sparta and sandy Pylos, so he can win a name for himself, so he can show himself to be worthy of being named Odysseus' son. So to a young man, winning that name, winning fame, is very important to becoming a man. We see the first instance where hospitality comes into play, into separating the brutes from those who are privileged and civilized. On page 181, Athena visits Ithaca, and all of these suitors are drunk and acting very badly. But Telemachus notes Athena's visit in the guise of mentor, and he greets the stranger and offers the stranger food and drink and hospitality, a chair to sit, all of these things. And this is what a good host should have done in a civilized country. And so Telemachus proves himself. So the idea of being tested, just like it was in Genesis and Exodus, is an important theme in this story. We see it time and time again, especially in the latter half of the Odyssey, how people are tested and whether they pass that test or not. And Telemachus passes this test of hospitality. And so Mentor, or Athena, during this feast, she stirs Telemachus up, says, "You're going to be a great man. You need to go off and prove your fame. You need to find out whether your father's still alive or not. You need to get rid of these suitors and all of these things." And so she sends him off. She says, "Go off and visit these other places." Now Telemachus, from then on, begins to assert himself as the head of this household. He is finally of age to do these things and is realizing, hey, these people are eating me out of house and home. And so the first way that he asserts himself as a man and the head of the household is on page 186, when he talks back to his mother. And he says on 186, lines 375, his mother's complaining about the songs that she sings, and she's crying, and she hopes that they're silenced. And he says, "You should go back upstairs and take care of your work, woman's work, spinning and weaving, and have the maids do theirs. Speaking is for men, for all men, but for me, especially since I'm the master of the house." So and one way to put it is he puts his mama in her place. And looking through our modern lens, I mean, this is to be criticized, perhaps, but at the time, this is a man was seen to have dominance over the household, of course. And this is the first way he begins to assert himself, is by showing himself in charge of the women. And then he begins to speak back to the suitors and speak roughly to them. And he calls an assembly of the people of Ithaca. And he speaks out. And the old men of Ithaca who remember Odysseus favor him. And the suitors speak against him. They speak harshly back to him. But this is another way that he begins to assert his manhood and his rights to being Odysseus's heir. And we see omens and things such as that portend ill news for the suitors, and they scoff at this news from the gods, and we're meant to see this as a warning to any of those who scoff at omens from the gods. There's a call for justice that Telemachus makes. And finally he says, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to go off and try to find my daddy, see if he's still alive. If I can't find him, then we'll marry my mother off. But one thing's for sure, we need to get rid of these suitors. I'm going to wipe the floor with y'all. And they say, oh, you're not going to. Yeah, well, we're going to see how he wipes the floor with them later. So the next couple of books are where we see Telemachus going off. He visits Nestor and he visits Menelaus, and we get a bunch of backstory here. We learn about the Trojan horse and things such as that. We learn about Odysseus and how he got thrown off course and things such as that. We see basically filling in the gaps between the Trojan War and the present time. So, of course, the characters of Nestor and Menelaus are important characters in the narrative. And the hospitality that they show proves them to be among those who are civilized. We see many rituals, the ritual of sacrifice, things such as that. We see some great singers. We see Helen again. And it's interesting to note here that, I mean, Helen is shown to be a favorable character, and it's always been strange to me, something that I had difficulty resolving, how they show her as such a favorable character, even though even in this text she was lured away by infatuation, and she seeks to lure the men out of the Trojan horse. And by the way, the Trojan horse story is not in the Iliad, it's in the Odyssey, strangely. And yet they forgive her, and she is a beautiful woman, and she's going to live forever, and all of these things. And so it's strange how the Greeks resolved that. In other myths, Helen is portrayed as a great villain, but in this myth, she's not. And it's resolved by saying that the gods kind of lured her into doing this. We learn of Odysseus' cunning, and time again they marvel at Telemachus and his actions, showing them to be just. Again, Telemachus, like I said, is meant to be a man who shows how a young man should act. We see an ideal king in Odysseus as well. And finally, Athena comforts Penelope, and Telemachus, we know that the suitors are planning for his demise. Yes, but Athena's at his back, so he's likely to succeed. All right, guys. Looking forward to the next passages. We're going to see Odysseus escape from Calypso. We'll see some of his adventures with the Phaeacians, and then we'll learn as he's at the home of Alcinous, many of the hardships that he suffered on his 10 years wanderings. So those are the next passages we'll be reading. Thanks again, guys. Look forward to reading more of your discussions, and I'll be responding on Monday. Peace. Cheers.